Good evening, everyone. We're going to begin our budget discussions this evening, and our first guest is East Great Plains Chief. Good evening, sir.
Let me start off a little bit. We made some changes to the request based on rising utility rates. So you might see, like in this example, utilities was requested at $16,700, and we unilaterally increased that to $17,581 because when they did the utility cost, it was lower. So we didn't want to get cut short before we even started the budget process. So you'll see that among many of the budgets. Other than that, we made a couple of adjustments here and there, but nothing significant. That's all I have. I turn it over to Chief Milton.
Good evening, Chief.
Good. Very good.
The mic working?
Put it closer.
Yeah. Is that better?
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Wanted to hear me.
We are on, so if the public is wishing to hear the discussions, please make sure the microphone is close enough.
I understand.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I don't have anything other than going through the budget and talking to Josh and the city manager. When they proposed it, everything looks good. Again, seeing some of the increases, knowing that probably a lot of the increases are due to the increases of everything across the board in the country and everything. But I'm very happy with it, and it's definitely a workable budget for us.
Okay, thank you. Members, President Pro Tem, please.
Hi, Chief. Good to see you. Thank you for coming in tonight. First thing I noticed is that your company went on nearly 1,000 calls last year.
That is correct, yep.
And that's not really a significant increase, but it is still an increase.
Yes, correct. Last few years, we've been averaging anywhere between like 925, 975 calls a year.
So how is that impacting your budget? I mean, I would imagine wear and tear on equipment, turnout gear,
Exactly.
helmets, boots.
You just hit the nail on the head. The wear and tear on the apparatus, the equipment, the turnout gear, and as I just stated a few seconds ago, unfortunately, with everything's on the rise, so gear costs more money now than what it did a few years back. It does take a toll. Thankfully, we're doing good though, and handling everything.
I have a question about a specific line item in your budget, and it's the same number for everybody. And unfortunately, you happen to be first tonight. Okay, so, the item is 55530 communications, and it's a line item that is consistent through the entire budget, every department, not just public safety, certainly not just the fire service, and certainly not just your company. But I wondered if you could enlighten us a little bit about, because your request was $8,900 and change. The authorized was 87, looks like 8720 from that small print from here, right? Can you give us a picture as to what your company spends this money on communications? Because I saw that and I thought radios.
Yeah, unfortunately, that doesn't come from us. That comes from Josh next door to me. But if I'm correct, that comes for the phones and all that different stuff. Josh, is that correct?
Yes, yeah, it includes landlines, the voice over IP system managed through Norwich Public Utilities. It includes email and related services such as firewall costs that are pushed down to all the departments, wireless phones, and let's see, I'm missing something. think that's pretty much, that's the bulk of it.
So I don't want to take up the members' time with the chief sitting right here, but, what we're saying is that this is not radios, this is not emergency communications
Correct.
or anything of that sort, that we're spending millions of dollars of ARPA money on.
Correct.
Right, okay. All right. I'll have some other questions about the communications piece, but I'll wait till, all you folks are done, and I'll talk with John and Josh about that. So that's the only question I have, Mayor.
Thank you. Alderman Wilson.
Good evening, Chief.
Good evening.
One thing I actually just wanted to ask a question on was, one of your capital expenditure requests was to renovate the staircase in the upstairs. And I just wanted to kind of get a feel for what type of renovation that was going to be looking like.
So upstairs in our firehouse, we have the 60, 70 round paneling, and behind that, the glue has asbestos in it. So we were going to remediate that and get rid of that all out of the firehouse. We already did one portion of the firehouse with some funds that were funded by the capital side of the budgets a few years back, and we're looking to do the other half of the firehouse plus the staircase. So basically to remediate the asbestos and get it all out of the firehouse.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Other questions? Thank you, Chief.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great night.
Let me just add, so we don't have to, there's also an item in the ARP for all the fire departments, which is the Lucas device. There's 7, I think I mentioned it yesterday, but each department then will have a Lucas device. So divide that number by the departments, and I think we have maybe one extra. And they're in there, so they're in the ARP.
Alderman Wilson.
This is probably more of a question for the city manager, but with the Lucas devices, I'm guessing that's going to be a cost for training. Is that incorporated into the overall budget, or is that something that kind of will be decided later on?
The price includes training and getting familiarized with the equipment.
All right.
We do have one department that uses it already, so that they will be helpful to us. Taffville has a Lucas device.
Okay.
They're pretty straightforward, but you do need to have training on it.
Well, and I just didn't want it to be where something that each department then has to use part of their training and professional development.
No, it's pretty straightforward, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. And yes, Alderman Singh.
Just a quick one. So is it Lucas 2 or Lucas 3 that we're getting?
I couldn't, what was that?
Is it Lucas 2 or Lucas 3 that we are getting?
I don't know.
I hope we are not getting just the
didn't know if it
Lucas,
was a
that's the
2 or
old
a 3.
version.
Unfortunately, I don't remember which one it was off the top of my head.
In fact, it's the latest one.
Oh, there you go.
Okay,
So
3.
That's the latest one.
Perfect.
I don't think you can even get the 2, and 1 has been obsolete for years.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Chief.
Very welcome. Thank you. Have a good night.
The next budget is Laurel Hill, and the chief is here. It's on page 84 and 85. And we made some reductions in here. The largest reduction was in equipment and furniture maintenance. We had a small increase, but we tried to keep it within the previous year's allotment, based on our estimates that the 23 should be sufficient. So that was the major reduction. There's a few here and there. Other than that, I'll turn it over to Aaron.
Chief, you got the floor. How are you?
Good evening, everyone. Chief Westerhoff from Laurel Hill. We presented a budget to the city manager that we thought was achievable for next year, given, like Chief Milton says, everything is going up in cost, so we're trying to obviously accommodate that the best we can. After having numerous conversations with Josh Pothier and the city manager, we, the budget that is presented is something we could work with for next year. And if you have anything else, I'll take questions.
Questions by members?
Pretty consistent.
Alderwoman Gould?
Good evening. Thank you for being here, Chief Westervelt. Can you just tell us what are some of the things that you do with the professional development money?
So professional development, that's our training section. One of the things we do for all of our members is we have a online program called Career Cert. I think all the departments in Norwich now have something very similar, maybe Target Solutions or Career Cert. It allows our EMTs to actually get recertified every year through just online training. We have to do X amount of hours in order to get recertified. So that does take up a large chunk of the money. And then the rest is Fire 1, Fire 2, EMTs and EMRs basically. And then we throw in classes throughout the year that people want to take.
And just one other question, if I could. In your capital budget, you asked for 20 sets of turnout gear, and you're getting 10. Will 10 be sufficient for your department for the next year?
So last year we got 6, so 10 is more than that. Our goal is to obviously equip every member with a second set of gear. We talked about it last year. That's where the 20 number comes from. That's what we need in order to do it. 10 will get us closer to that goal, and every year if I get a few more than I absolutely bare minimum, I can achieve that in a couple of years. So that's obviously the goal going forward.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Yes, Alderwoman Berto.
I just had a quick question. How do you go about recruiting volunteers?
Personally, how do we do it?
Yeah.
We have a few ways we do it. We do a lot of Facebook, and that's one of the things my vice president does a lot of is Facebook comments. Right, first thing you can see on the Facebook page is how to apply. So you scroll down the page, it's one of the first things, and he's always highlighting stuff we're doing throughout the community and calls and stuff like that. And then we actually go around every year, we do every event we go to. We're actively handing out pamphlets, talking to people. We do same in the district every year, and while we do that, we also hand out pamphlets, let people know what we do, and if they're ever interested. We have signs at the station. I also have an application through the city's website, and we have a box right outside the station that says apply here and leave application in this box.
Okay.
So we try quite a few things. We also have a sign outside the station that occasionally we'll put up there, members needed, and we'll just see what we get from that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Other questions? You're good, Chief. Thank you.
Good to see you, Chief.
And just to speak on the Lucas, we also have members in departments that are also paramedics and/or EMS instructors
Okay.
and have used these equipments, the Lucas device, for many years. So training probably won't be a problem or concern in any of them.
Yeah, and the newer version is actually a little more simplified than the,
Very simple.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of communities that already have them, so we use them on a pretty regular basis.
that's good. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. The third budget is for Ockham departments. Page
86.
88.
Or 87.
No, that's
No, I have it.
No, 86.
88,
Well, the numbers are on 88.
86, 87. It's on 88.
Yeah, the budget's on 88.
Flip page, there you go.
Oh, they have it.
86, 87, and 88. 88 is where the numbers are.
Yeah, why the wasted? Gotta fit it.
No, I think it's fine,
The narrative starts on 86.
because it's on a different page. Yeah. Is Ockham?
Thanks, here.
Oh, there you were.
Good evening.
Hi, Chief.
Deputy Chief, Ockham Fire Department. budget that's proposed for us, we can definitely work with that. As far as capital, the gear, we desperately need it. Second sets for our interior guys. And we can work with what we have. And as far as the struts, that will complete our ensemble for the extrication process of stabilizing the vehicles. We had to go up on utilities and fuel, as you know. And physicals, we had to go up from last year. Everything goes up. And we've got more firefighters now. We just had 4 come in. And this, with this new grader, will be going 2. So, and 2 of those people are interior. And the 2 of them came in are female. And they already have excellent certifications. And they're already fire 1. One is fire 2, fire instructor. So we're getting in an influx of some nice people where we didn't have that opportunity in past years. So the budget you propose, we will work with it. So if you have any questions.
Thanks, Chief. Members,
Thank you.
any questions? Alderwoman Gould.
Good evening, Chief Spaulding. Thank you for being here. I can't call you Deputy Chief. I don't know how to.
Me
I only know you as Chief.
Me either, right, I'm the same way.
How many, where's your membership stand right now?
It stands at 38.
Okay. And you've had a significant increase in your call volume.
Yes, we have.
Acom is getting busier and busier every year.
Yeah, we're having a lot more mutual aid calls than we used to. We're up to 19 for the year so far. Where the previous years, we've only had maybe 4 or 5. So we had a pretty good increase.
And are those in-town or out-of-town calls for mutual aid?
It's,
You want to grab that container of water? They don't
it's
need
probably
it.
more in town.
We don't have
than
one here.
Out of town. But, as I understand it right now, we have been put on run cards in other departments outside the city. So, and we are presently on the tanker task force. So,
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh.
Chief, could you get a little more descriptive about the tanker task force?
well, it's the EF4, and that's for southern part of the state here. And what happens is, if they need tankers, they call the tanker task force. And what we do is we go with the tanker task force and we set up supply. So we refill the tankers. Basically, that's will be our function.
Thank you. Other questions? We're all set. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Another note. The grant money, we're moving along on that. The sign at the Aqua Station, that's up and running as of today. And there's also going to be recruitment on that for new members. So
Excellent.
we're trying to spend money wisely.
Thank you, sir.
The next budget is Yantic.
Hey, good evening, everyone.
Good
evening.
Hi, Chief.
How's things?
Good.
I got here early, so I could maybe, been 20 years since I've been to a budget meeting, so I wanted to kind of feed off these other guys to see what kind of questions you were going to ask. If you take a look at my current budget, again, I want to piggyback off what the city manager had stated. The 2 items that I kind of identified as already being areas of concern are utilities and fuel. And I'd asked for a modest increase on that, and those are both kind of controlled by the city. As far as the rest of the budget, if you look at my request for this year, it's less than 0.1% difference from last year. And if you look at my existing budget right now, I'm at the 74.8% spent with 3 months to go. So I'm right where I should be as far as managing the budget.
The only thing, we did add physicals to the proposed budget. Originally was out. I'm sorry, we didn't, that was the wrong one, I'm sorry. We didn't add it to his. I was looking at Taft. I skipped over Taft, didn't I? I just wanted to see if the chief was checking on that. So he's not here. Okay, that's a good reason. I must have instinctively done that. Okay.
Eyes in the back of your head?
Because I don't feel so bad now. Okay. If you want to go back to the capital, is anything that you need to ask questions on, that's on page 122.
Okay, Alderman Wilson, you had your hand up first?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that the city manager had finished all his thoughts. You're all set? Okay. The only question that I had actually was, you had one request for replacing of the fire alarm system. So kind of just elaborate on that.
Sure. The fire alarm system at the station's probably 25 years old. We've had some minor repairs taken care of. Probably around the holidays, but parts are going to be getting tough. And technology's changed drastically over the last 25 years. So most of the wiring should be savable and serviceable. That's probably where most of the labor comes in. But it's basically a new brain for the fire alarm system, as well as modernizing the full station detectors and some of those devices that are required.
Okay. And then actually I had one other question. You had for training area improvements, and is that an outdoor or is that the training room itself?
No, that would be outdoor. We have some property that's available to us that we do own, and we were kind of thinking about maybe having utilities put in a pole tower for us, and we could practice ladders and hose work and some of those basic skills. We used to use the mill quite a bit. That's kind of going away, and throwing ladders against the building, and we kind of have to be careful where we do that. So that was a generic request, and there's always something to be said for proximity and availability along those lines.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pro Tem?
And this is really not related to budget, other than it connects back to what Alderman Wilson asked earlier in terms of the training on the Lucas devices.
Yes.
I know how deeply you're involved in the Fire Academy. Does the Fire Academy offer training on those kinds of devices or recertification or anything like that?
Yeah,
as a resource to the city that could
Sure.
train
Yeah,
people
there's
first?
an EMS branch up at the fire school, and I'm sure they've had familiarity with that. But I do believe part of the contract requires them to give us training and at the initial time of purchase.
Well, and that's my concern, as new people come into the service, right? They need to be trained, and I would imagine that the lawyers would like it if everybody's recertified every so often and so on, right? So.
Yeah, no, there is an EMS branch up at the fire school.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other members?
Do you have any more? like
Alderwoman
this
Gould.
With these rings?
Thank you
I like
for
that
being here,
better.
Chief Ivers.
You don't have to hold up.
How old's the underground storage tank that you're going to be replacing?
That's a good point. One of those things I forgot. So yes, that tank is 22 years old. It was put in the first time I was chief. So that should be looked at and maybe put to the top of the list. The other thing that's happening with the renovations and reconstruction of the mill, gas line's going to be run down Gantic Road, and under Chief Blanchard's direction, when they paved the parking lot on, I'll call it the north end of the firehouse, a gas line was already put in from the boiler room to the street. So it's just waiting for the city gas to go by and we can tap in and maybe convert the furnace over. And that may be something we may have to address next year. Next year is that conversion of that boiler to natural gas. I think it would save everyone money and obviously be a lot more efficient.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other members? Yes, Alderwoman Roberto.
I just had a quick question. I noticed you have the CCTV system upgrade. That's for outside your building, correct?
Correct. And again, the same thing. It's an older system, and we probably had to repair it at least a half dozen times within the last year. And again, changing the heads, changing the brain, and it should be, that should take care of the security system.
And then I also noticed you have a rope rescue hardware replacement.
Yes, so we do have the NFPA standard says that when ropes get to a certain age, or as ropes get worn down even from training, they have to be replaced. So there are times where either the hardware or the software, the ropes, have to be replaced.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Good to see everyone. That was painless. Thanks.
I don't think the chief is here from Yantic yet.
No,
And,
from Taftville.
I'm sorry, Taftville. And the Norwich Fire is... I don't think
He's
here
walking
yet.
in now.
He's walking in, okay.
Yes.
I just texted him, but
Okay.
we're running a little ahead, so I...
Yep.
Chief, you're up.
I should probably text Daley.
We're early.
You know.
Yep, but thank you for joining us.
Yes, I'm sorry, I read that wrong.
I'm going to do Daley.
Is that the pool? Like that pool thing, right? No? Like the Yantic one? Oh.
You know, if you want to give the chief a minute, I have a couple of questions
Sure.
about the public safety side. That probably Josh would be better equipped to handle. So, Josh, going back to communication line item. So the thing that most caught my attention was that the Norwich fire dollar amount for that line item is $56,000 and change, when the volunteer departments are, let's just call it roughly around 10 grand, so 5 times more expensive. And then as I worked my way backward, we get to the police department, who's also going to be up tonight, and it's $250,000. And I'm like, is this, that really, sticks out. The communications piece at that level of expense.
Right, so that Norwich Fire and the police department have some radio infrastructure support costs that kind of cover all of the fire departments, switches and Cisco switches for that run the radio system, and those are definitely bring up the costs of the Norwich Fire Department and Norwich Police Department. To a smaller, I think each of the volunteer fire departments have smaller amounts of those costs just for the smaller switches that allow the stations to connect to that system, but the backbone of it is paid for by the Norwich Police and Norwich Fire Departments.
So when we upgraded the radio system for the police department, these are the costs that came along with? Along with phone systems and so on and so forth, but...
These costs existed before the police department converted over to the Connecticut State Police system. It's the cost of the equipment that let's see, I think Chief Montoya could probably explain it better than I can on how the radio receiver and equipment that goes between the fire stations works with the Norwich Public Utilities fiber system.
Okay, I'll try. I don't know if I can, but I'll try. So what I heard from the question, I think, was if the switchover that the police department made, why we're still showing the bill, is that part of the question?
Well, yeah, because, you know, obviously the goal with the police radio upgrade, which is the same goal with the fire service upgrade and dispatch upgrade that we have underway, is to make communications better so that everybody is safer. Right? That's the primary goal, no argument, right? But when you spend those kinds of dollars on a system, at least from where I sit, the hope is that it also brings some efficiencies which reduce operational costs. And I noticed what you're talking about, Josh, is that the costs seem to be level. And so so I think we achieved the primary goal, but, you know, it's very easy to lose sight of the operational costs when you're doing a big project like this, but that operational cost is in this budget every single year, and you know, that catches my attention. So I guess I'm looking for some sort of understanding of why those costs stay flat, even though we upgraded to a system that is more efficient, you know, more safe, more effective.
Well, the short answer is we haven't made the upgrade yet. So the police department's upgrade to their system didn't impact fire department. Right. So no equipment changes there. They built a new tower on Orchard Street. None of our systems switched over. So we still have the operating cost for I'll call it the legacy system, since we have the new system coming on, hopefully this summer. August is the goal. But there will still be, you know, just to kind of give you guys all a heads up, that next year when we're on the new system, there's still going to be some operating costs of the old system, because we will still maintain some of it for necessary reasons in the system. It's not turn one on, turn the other off, and wipe all those expenses away. I wish it were, but it's not. Hopefully they will be reduced, primarily the maintenance, the replacement costs, the other things like that will be reduced because we won't be replacing equipment. We won't have the service tickets, which are quite expensive from Tactical, for any time low band or high band goes down or we have a system issue. So that will drop, but it's not going to be eliminated immediately.
So then it's fair to say that even with the new system, we should expect to have these kinds of operating costs moving forward?
Yes, sir.
From year to year?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
And there will be some new costs with the new system. Hopefully, most of our expenses will be able to piggyback, if you will, on the PD's infrastructure. but there are still licensing and frequency and subscription fees and things that I don't even know the terminology for involved with the radios and the technology. But again, as you stated at the beginning, the goal is public safety and firefighter safety, and that's what we're going for with the new system.
Okay, fair enough, thank you.
Chief, the floor is yours.
Thank you. My apologies, I had 7:15 on my schedule for us.
That's on us.
I missed the previous presentation, so I'm not sure if you had a specific format you wanted to go. I think Norwich Fire is listed first, so I'll start there. I will hopefully anticipate some of the questions on the cuts that were made and if this is manageable for the firehouse. First and foremost, as it has been for a number of years, is the capital cut of Squad A. On a positive note, there is some informal discussion on hopefully utilizing ARPA funding for the replacement of the squad. And if that comes to fruition, then clearly that takes that worry off of my head. The remaining of the capital was pretty good. No real cuts. We had some projects at headquarters. The building is 27 years old now, and it's showing its age in plumbing. Probably not this year or next year or the year after, but within a few years, you'll see a major capital expense coming up for roofing and some huge projects, including the generator replacement. We thought we might have a generator replacement on this budget. We had some issues last year with the generator. We had to actually rent a temporary generator at headquarters for a short period. And that is, as you can imagine, a generator supplying fire headquarters is not a small ticket item. So again, just forecasting, but just for your awareness. From the Norwich Fire budget, the general fund, I think the only substantial cut that comes for me, and I say substantial in terms of meaningfulness, not necessarily dollars, was I had requested a position upgrade of the Director of Training and Safety from his current non-ranked position to a chief level position, an assistant chief, a battalion chief of training and safety, a deputy chief, or whatever the terminology may be, on pay equivalent to the battalion chiefs. And I see that, at least from the draft that I have in front of me, that was cut. The other cuts, typically, training is our big challenge, and training plays a professional develop 53322 is a line item, is because we as a minimum manpower shop, we incorporate staffing and replacement costs into our training budget. And it's explained to me, a few different ways that it's not a training professional development expense. That's for your materials, for your classes, for your registrations, and things like that, but not for manpower. Which I'm okay, I'm accepting of that answer. But that means we have to take that portion for staffing and put it under overtime. And that always doesn't translate. So the translation for me is that the training budget is almost, went from 120 requests to 56. And that's a substantial hit. But the flip to it is the overtime budget doesn't offset that. So when we take into our calculations of our training predictions and budget, and mandatory classes for new firefighters, for new officer promotees, and things like that, we have to take into account staffing. So we're constantly behind the eight ball on that because we get that cut, we get the staffing cut out of it, and we do the best we can. Sometimes I will say, I'll give the city manager a little credit for this too, is in our last contract negotiation, we were able to add a third category of our training that the fire department sanctioned training, that is. So just a very quick overview. We have 3 levels of training that the firefighters and the officers can take. Elective, they're on their own. They pay for the class on their own. They use their own time. They go for it. We'll sponsor it in terms of a lot of firefighting training requires a department head signature. Our next level is sponsored. I'd love you to go. This is a great class. I can't afford to send you staffing-wise, but I'll pay for the course for you and you can go. That's our new ad this last contract was a sponsored training. And the other one is sanctioned. The third one is sanctioned. And sanctioned is you'll go to the class, we'll pay you for your time, we'll pay for the course, we'll pay you your mileage and everything. So we needed that hybrid in between the sanctioned and the elective, and we got sponsored, and that's on top of my mind right now, just because we have a class coming up in May that we offered to the group as sponsored training. You know, I'll eat the seminar fee, but I can't pay you 8 hours to sit there. Our training budget's just too low right now, and it's towards the end of the fiscal year. But so that's, you know, my two primary concerns in the draft that I have before me are, again, the DTS position and the training budget. Other than that, I understand the other cuts. We're pretty good. You know, we try to, end of last year, we had to do some shuffling because of replacement costs and overtime. And we pushed off a little equipment that we jumped on in the beginning of this fiscal year. So we always make ends meet and do the best we can with the means we have available. But those are my two primary concerns.
Thank you. Alderman Wilson.
You know, could you give a little bit more into, you know, changing that director of training, training and safety position into more of a chief's or battalion chief's role or level, and what the significance of that would be?
All right. Significance on the operational side is, as a department of our size, a safety and training officer, if you look across the state, nearly all the comparable ones are chief officers, assistant chief, deputy chief, which, you know, it's not about the title, it's about the role. The role of the DTS, and all of you should be familiar with this from our crazy season of storms, as a deputy EMD, I mean, that's a full-time position in and of itself. Safety on the fire scene, that could be a full-time position of itself. Training, with all the mandates that we've had, both ongoing training, recertification training, initial training for promotees and for hires. Again, a lot of departments break those three entities into separate positions. So for us, I've been the chief for a little over 3 years, and I'm my fourth training officer. I tried to get the first one to stay, Jake Mankey, who we all know and love. He had other things on his horizon and moved on to the state to bigger and better things. I don't know if this were a chief level officer, if he would have left. I can't say that, can't predict that. One that was hired while I was deployed left before I returned from deployment, so I can't speak to his rationale for leaving. And then the third one was a temporary one, and now I'm in my fourth. I think that the feedback from Chief Lusick, he filled in for me for my year of deployment. Between him and Jason Boletto, who was the one that was hired while I was gone and left, that across the board, everyone thinks that the position is undervalued and understaffed. And by that I mean it's not necessarily a title position or an authoritarian position, it's just that the position's undervalued. And you can look at other departments, you know, across the state again, and see what they're doing for officers in the training and safety division. I think that his added role of deputy EMD just exponentially increases those responsibilities. You know, I love to restructure the position to share the training load with shift officers. You know, we have plenty of shift officers, and collateral duties are pretty heavy as it is, but, you know, there's always room to take on a little bit more at the firehouse. I think interaction-wise, I think it's and again, I don't want to hang up on the terminology of rank, but I think that there is, you know, he goes to a lot of seminars and represents the city and the fire department in a lot of different venues, and he is frequently asked, well, you know, what's your role on the safety officer? All right, chief, and people just assume he's a chief because that's kind of the norm. I think it's a tricky kind of position to define in that way of how that change would happen and do it in a short period. I don't think I'm doing it justice right now, but I can tell you that as a battalion chief with Chief Scand and when Jake was in the position, I lobbied for the two of them to elevate the position, and we did years ago. There was no rank associated with the position before, so this is for the council members that aren't familiar with the history of the position. So we allowed him to test and move up in rank. We established something in the contract so we would have a period of time and a testing for each rank level. Mark Waters, the current DTS, came in from the outside, didn't have that option, left a position as a battalion chief in New London, where he came to us from New London, but so it's a challenge. It's a challenge. I've talked to HR about it, I've talked to Mr. Salomon about it, I've talked to the union about it, and I think across the board there's an agreement that it's necessary to acknowledge the roles and responsibility of the position and make it the title and the pay commensurate with what he has on his plate. I hope that answered your question, sorry.
No, it answers the question. I had, of course, going yesterday, interaction and noticing that was a huge difference with some of the other departments having, chiefs or assistant chiefs that served in the role as their function was a lot of the training load and things of that sort. So that's the only reason I wanted you to explain the rationale to why you would want to switch or transform the title. So thank you.
I think another important aspect is, and we've lived this, is continuity of operations. If there's a on paper and in theory and in practice, a second in command for me, granted, I don't plan on going on any more military deployments at this point in my life, but the past 3 years, probably the past 2.5 years would have been a little different for the firehouse. It would have been a smoother transition. It would have been smoother in operations. It would have been smoother union-wise. It probably would have been less expensive. There would have been a number of benefits to it. So I think that is key too. It's not just the position as itself, but the position of where it fits in the Norwich Fire Department.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other members' questions at this point? Pro Tem, please.
If I may,
Excuse me,
I want
the
to
city
comment on
manager.
the position. I decided to wait on acting on this position until next year when we initiate contract negotiations again with the union. This isn't, everybody's in the union except for the chief as far as the firefighters. So I feel the appropriate time is to do it during contract negotiations. It'll become a give and take on that, and I like to keep anything to do with salaries and everything in contract negotiations. So we're certainly not saying a no to this. We just have delayed it to put it with the contract in the discussions next year.
Thank you, John. Pro Tem, please.
So, to that point, and you can answer individually, and you can disagree, in front of all of us and the public. Do you envision this as an executive position, non-union? So you'll be taking a person out of the bargaining unit and saying, now you're the second in command, but you are now an executive in the fire service person?
I always strive for that. It's a difficult road to hoe to have somebody out of the unit, but the appropriate time to do it is during negotiations, because then you have, I don't want to give all my strategy away, but you have more leverage to discuss things like that than if you're doing it on an individual basis outside of the bargaining group.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you don't have to give away you don't have to show all your cards, I just
No, I
wondered
wouldn't.
what your thinking was, because,
And I
we
think,
trust you to make those kinds of decisions.
in the conversations I've had, both with myself and with others on it, I've gone both routes. Is it better for the position to be in the union or outside of the union? Is it better for the union to maintain that position? And there are a lot of factors. And really, I'm not convinced either way. I could probably argue either side in a reasonable fashion, but I don't know that either side has, at least at this point, a bigger benefit than the other. I think that there are pros and cons to both. There are pros and cons to the individual, whoever it may be in that position, to both. And it depends on the need. If you look at current position and the current individual as an outside higher. He doesn't have time with the city of Norwich to have the benefits of maybe some of the things in the contract that had he come from the inside, that a candidate would have. So there are pros and cons to both. Not sold on either, but I think that it's certainly worthy of discussion.
Fair enough. And I would say, just for my part, I think that makes it better left to collective bargaining. And let the people involved negotiate instead of me as one of 7 saying, you should do this or that.
And that being said, I think that, if it were to happen before then, it wouldn't go through that process anyway. I mean, there's still negotiations with the executive board and the union president and HR and the city manager and myself to kind of work the pieces out of the puzzle, if you will. And it would be handled, prior to or outside of contract negotiations through an MOA. Same process.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions, anyone, on this portion?
Not, I just have a general
Alderman Singh.
question. So is there any a line item for PPE supplies? Like they're talking about another wave coming? Or are we all equipped with everything in our budget?
There's not here. I don't know if and Josh would be able to answer if the grant that we've been purchasing, the city as a whole has been purchasing the COVID supplies with, is still valid. I don't know, but I can say that from a stock perspective, we have a lot of PPE on stock. We could certainly use a few of some items, but we have, thousands upon thousands, tens of thousands of N95s. We have gowns. The one thing we are short of, which we ran out of last voting season, were the face shields. There's not, we use our medical supplies kind of crossover because, as you know, on our medical responses, not only, us, all the fire services and the EMS services are dealing with a high COVID encounter rate out there. So we're doing our typical PPE, but it's amplified a little bit, for COVID. And I think we're pretty good there. So that would fall under our other supplies, not necessarily COVID supplies specific. And as I said, Josh would be the one to answer if the other monies are available.
The FEMA reimbursement of COVID supplies is kind of winding down at this stage.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, again, on this portion of his presentation? Pro Tem, please.
So does that mean that with PPE seemingly going to be in our future, foreseeable future, right? That means that that PPE is going to be a line item, and eventually we're going to have to, the city is going to have to pay.
Correct. If we need to replenish our stock, then it'd be an additional operating cost.
So what I'm driving at is when should we expect that? Is it that will the FEMA program be done by the time we're looking at a budget a year from now? And this,
I think as the pandemic evolves, the guidance from FEMA evolves. So if there were to be another major outbreak, I think FEMA would probably adjust their guidance on what's reimbursable.
okay.
Thank you. Chief, continue, please.
All right, I'll move on to emergency management. And really, again, the tie-in there to the DTS position is as a deputy EMD, part of his salary was made up out of there, so that was a cut, obviously. The numbers are okay, they're manageable. The one thing is building maintenance and repairs went down $500, not a huge amount, but we're also looking at doing some stuff this year, which I think we're okay though. The bathroom is dated, and the more we use that building for training and other purposes, and the other groups use it, just need to do a few updates, but I think emergency management's pretty sound.
Thank you. Other questions with the EMS? Alderwoman Gould?
I want to flip back a page, okay? Because I'm sitting here thinking, when you were talking about the Director of Training and Safety, you used the word undervalued. Are you talking about undervalued in the area of compensation, or undervalued because that person's title is not may need to be changed to Chief of Training and Safety or Deputy of Training and Safety rather than Director? I wasn't sure how you were, what you meant when you said that you thought that the position was undervalued.
I think with the level of responsibility, the roles of authority, and the duties in that position, it's undervalued in both fronts, financially and in title, but primarily financially. We could change the title of the position, you know, so currently there's not the money in there. The city manager wants to wait till next contract. Well, let's say it's more of a pressing issue for the union and they want to push on it, and I agree with that. And we come to the city, to HR and to the city manager, and we do an MOA on restructuring the position without any financial compensation or anything like that. That really doesn't fix it. Because again, the role, the responsibilities, the duties of that position far exceed what it was originally intended.
Thank you.
Yes, Pro Tem, please.
Thank you. So, because currently, when you're not here, right, a battalion chief is elevated to run the daily operations of the fire department in your absence. And you're saying that the role of the Director of Training Safety would be that, now become that, would be that number 2 person if the change were to be enacted. So that's really the different, so in terms of the role and responsibilities, that position would automatically be the number 2 person in the fire department.
In some fronts, it already is. So let's say this month I have my 2 weeks of military time.
Oops.
When I go out of town, I'll let my boss know and some other department heads know that, hey, I'm out of town. This is kind of my typical thing. I'll be out unavailable these dates. For any fire department operational needs, reach out to the on-duty battalion chief. For any department emergency management needs or training needs, reach out to the Director of Training and Safety. So he fills that role now under some of the responsibilities, and obviously the fire response and emergency response operations fall under the battalion chief.
Okay.
So it's really not a change because he's doing it now, and that ties into the being undervalued. He's being utilized in a role that exceeds the position. And that's not by his fault, my fault, the system's fault. It's just how it kind of transformed over the years. And if you think about the history of the fire department and the rank structure and how many times it's changed, even in my 31 years, it's kind of silly at times, but with our department size, with our volume of calls, with our level of training, with our responses, it's warranted.
Thank you.
To continue this discussion a little bit.
Yes, sir.
And looking going forward, with negotiations again in the out years, does the fact that the battalion chiefs are in the same union as the rest of the department, does that inhibit any form of leadership or directive within the department, in particular when you're away, as we had recently seen? Does that cause a discussion like we're having right now to be needed more? Does it enhance its need? I mean, if you're in the same, I was a union guy, Teamster, retired, you know. There are times, again, looking forward, not looking back, discipline in any department, police, fire, you name it. The fact that they're in the same union, does that present issues at times internally? And if you don't want to comment on that, we can comment after, that's fine. I always thought, you know, if they want to be in a union, fine, but maybe it should be a different union. And Just your thoughts.
Yeah, no, I don't mind commenting at all, and it's a timely topic because we've recently had issue with that and discipline, and the question was raised, you know, how is a union brother in the same body as me
Right.
exacting discipline on me? And I don't want to use this term in a dismissive way, but the common sense approach is that by his position of authority, you know, he has that responsibility
Right.
to administer discipline. HR is on the same page with that. We're all in agreement with it. It's in the job description. There has been talk over the years of, you know, maybe the shift commanders, when we went to battalion chiefs from captain, maybe the shift commanders should be in a separate union. I don't know the workings of that, how feasible it is. It would be a union of 4, you know, 5 if you had a director of training and safety in there. So I don't know if that's a workable solution, but the issue of being in the same union has only really raised its head in the matter of discipline. And that was pretty much put to sleep. We understand, everyone understands now
Right.
the role of that and the responsibilities of the position.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other? No? Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you got out and enjoyed some of the warm weather today. We reviewed the proposed budget. We can definitely work within the means. The only concern we had, or looking for ways to address it, was we put in for the parking lot replacement, which is partially dirt now. Every year it causes maintenance from the snow plows now. And then if that wasn't an option, we broke it down to one small part of it, which is changing the electrical service over. The electrical service is, the pole is already sitting there, and it's original to the building. So the lengthy part is it would have to be brought up to code and up to grade. Them are the only two concerns. Otherwise, we feel we can work within the monies that are provided.
Thank you, Chief. John, is there anything you wish to add?
No.
Okay, thank you. Members, questions? Alderman Wilson.
Yeah, I mean, actually, the 2 questions that I actually had was about the parking lot. So the electrical upgrades are just for the parking lot and has nothing to do with the
No, it has to
interior
do
part of the
with,
building?
it has to do with the whole structure. So the corner of the parking lot, the main feed, which was put in 1969, is on the pole. If you drive by and look at it, the pole looks like it's ready to fall over. It was actually condemned by utilities about 20 years ago. So, but in order for them to replace it, even with a new pole, you still have to move that electrical service and bring it up to code. So that's the big sticking point. Unfortunately, there is a cost tag with that.
So the other part is does that mean does that work only on the exterior part, or is there interior, anything have to be done as well to the station?
That's to upgrade the entire service.
Okay.
So it would upgrade right up into the circuit breakers and stuff like that, because everything, the system would have to be upgraded as it went along.
Okay. And then, you know, just along the lines of the parking lot and the need for the upgrade. You know, I know there's been grave concerns about, you know, vehicles being hit and just the inadequate space when individuals are coming to respond for calls and things of that sort. So just more so for the public, the significance of needing a parking lot expansion.
So if you go back to the original building, when it was built in 1969, we had 7 parking places, but back then everybody used to run to the firehouse. They lived in the village, they no longer do that. We've had, that accounted for 7 spots, 8 spots to park. Now with several expansions later on, 74, 73, 74, 89, and the most recent one in 2019, it's kind of interesting to figure that when they designed the building in 1968, it was said that we'll never outgrow that spot. So We actually did fairly shortly afterwards. We've had members that cars were legally parked on the side of the road. They were struck in the middle of the night by several drivers. And, you know, that's on them people. They're responding to help their local resident, you know, somebody in the community. They legally park on the side of the road. They get sideswiped, the vehicle gets totaled. There's nothing for them. Also, Taffel's not the same community that I grew up in. Out of necessity, we had to put cameras on the outside of the structure. It's not uncommon to come back and find your vehicle. If you don't lock it, it's either been ransacked or somebody's gone through your stuff. So it gets it out of the public's eye and gets it onto quote-unquote fire department property.
Okay, and then, you know, just to follow up, the 600,000, that would be for just the work, or is that for also the architecture and all?
$600,000 is for the entire soup to nuts project. That's the side of the station and the front apron. Front apron, as it said, wasn't designed to have a 80,000-pound truck roll over it. So you can actually see where the concrete is breaking up, where the pivot point is where the tower turns. So that just creates a trip and fall hazard. Several years ago, we had an issue with the sidewalk, and that cost us a workers' comp injury of 3 months. So a gentleman was on his way to his call. The sidewalk concrete was broken, trip, fall, and like I said, it was 3 months out of work. That project takes care of that. The storm drain that is at the entrance to the firehouse would finally get fixed, hopefully correctly, because I've been there for 33 years, and every 5 years, we fix the parking lot where the storm drain is, and we hear, it'll be fine, it's fixed right this time. In my 33 years, it's been done 6 or 7 times. It has never been fixed right. They take the cap off. That includes going all the way down to the ground. There's actually a stream that runs underneath the property, fixing it and coming back up. It takes care of relocating the generator, so that it requires natural gas lines to be run, electrical lines to be run, and that also encompasses moving the shed, which is used for outside storage, and regrading the parking lot. The question is that whole section in the back there is some ledge, so whether it'll have to blast, chip, or not, or maybe we can cross our fingers and not have to.
Okay. Now, and that's perfect, you answered pretty much all of, but that also would include that architectural design and all of those
Actually,
pieces
we
as well?
worked with Public Works.
Okay.
2 or 3 years ago. We worked with the city engineer. We came up with a plan and formulated a plan as far as reconstructing the parking lot. The engineers who shot the grades, they're a few years old. They'd probably have to reshoot them again, but it's something we've been working towards over the last few years.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Other members, questions? Alderman Singh.
So the pole for electrical service, you said the pole is already there? Because that,
Yes, when we moved when we took over the tennis courts, or what used to be the tennis courts, the existing poles the lights were on in our parking lot, and they're set on a timer, so the kids would have to come in, push the buttons for the lights to go on. The utilities set new poles so that they're over the basketball court. We moved that box so the kids don't have to walk all the way around the fence. They can literally walk over by the garbage can and push it. At that time, utilities put in 3 poles. So the 3 poles were one for the new electrical service, and then 2 for the existing basketball court.
but those are utility poles, like owned by NPU, or
Yep,
we paid for it?
They're owned by NPU.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, members? Alderwoman Gould.
Good evening, Chief Jenks. Thank you for being here tonight. I've asked a couple of the departments, and I think I know the answer to this, but it seems like everyone's had a significant increase in call volume, probably related to the pandemic. Some departments are up 100 calls a year, some are up 50 calls a year, which may be significant for that department. But do you expect that your call volume will be the same this coming year as it was in the last year?
So I can remember years back when we made 300 calls in a year. It was a major ordeal. We've far surpassed that. We're on a trend to continually increase our call volume over the last few years by a couple of % each time. Surprisingly, with the COVID restrictions and emergency responses, we didn't go to some quote-unquote COVID calls in an effort to not expose all of our first responders, so the ambulance would handle a lot of them. But we were only 50 calls short from where we were the year before. We ran 803, we were at 753 last year. The difference is we still picked up the calls because people stayed home and they attempted home improvements on their own, or they tried cooking different things, and the house made noises, so we were still responding to smell of gases and fire alarms and stuff like that. So it kept that call volume steady. So we were only 50 off, and that was with the quote-unquote pandemic restrictions that was implied by the hospital. So yeah, I do see a continual increase over the years.
Okay, and in your capital budget,
Yes, ma'am.
you've got an underwater ROV. For those who don't know what that is, can you give them a little explanation?
Sure. We've applied for one for several grants through the Bear Group and several other search and rescue agencies. We currently have a side scan sonar unit that we built ourselves using a fish finder and some other pieces, and it works very well. We used it most recently in North Stonington, and they had been out there for a couple hours by the time we got called in there with our resources, and they do a thing what's called mowing the lawn. So they basically go back and forth, and when they pick something up on the sonar unit, they make a hit, mark it, and then after we're so far in, we'll actually go out and we'll deploy a diver. The problem with deploying a diver is hot days, weather environments, stuff like that. So the ROV, and as the diver goes down and comes up continuously, it builds up nitrogen in the system. So the ROV technology's come down quite a bit. You'll be able to go up and drop this over, navigate to that area, search that area. If there's a victim located or we've got to retrieve something, we can lock onto it with it, and then it's a direct line down. It's got a camera, it's got a video on it, so you see what you're looking at. We're basically decreasing some of the risk of injuries to our divers as we go along. If you've got a lake that you got to make 10 dives on, that's technically 10 divers. Or in the past, we've had a person through the ice. You can safely deploy this before you go and put the person into the water. And the sad part about that is once they come out, we are in New England, all of the equipment freezes and it takes some time to thaw out. So this will be just a little bit, another tool in the toolbox to make them sort of recoveries and stuff like that a little on the safer side for our people. The closest hyperbaric chamber, if we have a dive emergency, is the subbase. And we do actually have an MOU with them to use it. Other than that, it's Danbury Hospital. So we're trying to make sure that all of our people come home.
Other members, other questions? Thank you, Chief. Good to see you.
Yep. Thank you guys for your time.
Appreciate all you do.
I want to say thank you to those council people that showed up and were able to get a tour of the station. If those that haven't, just reach out. We'd be more than happy to have you around. Thank you.
Okay, next would be the Norwich Police Department. I have the Chief Daly is here. You can do either. The numbers are on page 74.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Evening, Pat.
Hi, Chief.
I want to thank the city manager and the comptroller for their efforts in the budget. You can see there are very few adjustments made to my budget.
from last year. Some areas of concern we have, and we have long talks with our staffing level, is slowly slipping down. We're also having great trouble finding officers right now. So I think the agreement is that we're trying not to fund positions that are not likely to be able to hire because of the staffing shortage that police in the country are having, not just Norwich police. You'll see an increase in professional development. If we do hire officers, it's now risen up to send to State Police Academy, $3,500 an officer, so 10 officers right there would eat $35,000 of the training budget. Also seeing return to in-person training throughout the country. So we have to 2 years of making up because of COVID. So we increased the training budget significantly as playing catch up, and also as a morale booster. Training everyone, all the officers want to be trained. They want to learn new skills and develop themselves in their careers. So it's one of the few ways we can actually motivate the officers who are still slugging it out in the trenches, and so that's why you'll see that bump in the training budget. It's really needed, to be honest with you. We have 2 years, like I said, 2 years to catch up, but it's going to be tough to even find classes. They're filling up so fast now that COVID restrictions are lifting. So that's pretty much the two areas we had concern. You'll see there's an increase in the replacement cost, pretty significant increase in replacement cost. For those who were here last year, remember the city manager said, and I quote because I have a strange memory like that, I think we finally right-sized the police budget, and he was right when we were fully staffed, but now we've lost people, so we still have to fill jobs in. And if COVID does have another surge, a COVID exposure or a COVID positive results in a 10-day absence from work as of right now. So we lost a tremendous amount of man hours this year. Because every time an officer was exposed, it was 10 days. Not so much on the first wave of COVID, more on the second wave of COVID, the Delta, and then definitely Omicron, because that was spread and we had many exposures. So those 10 days an officer. Then late at the end, it tailed out to a 5-day exposure with a negative PCR test. So, or a negative at home test. But it's still 5 days away. So that really had an impact on our budget, and that between the retirements and departures is the reason for the increase in the replacement costs. So that being said, I'll answer any questions like what's going on.
Alderman Singh.
Yes, so can you explain a little bit more the armor response vehicle, the refurbished one that we are getting?
That's an armored rescue vehicle. That's the armored vehicle we got from the 1033 program probably 3 or 4 years ago. It came from the federal government. Parts we've been trying over the last 3 or 4 years to get through the government, through the National Guard and the U.S. Army. The windows are the major problem there because it sits outside, and when we got it, the windows were actually fogged. So the windows are expensive. We tried everything. We've tried going through all the government websites we can, but in the meantime, the gun violence has continued. It was just last year, late last year, Officer DuPoint had his cruiser shot, 23 times with an assault rifle. The cruiser was disabled by the first handful of rounds. They just went right through the car and disabled the engine. So obviously, where the firepower that is out in the public, we have to have an ability to continue on. That would have been one of the calls we could have used to that. Because he retreated back to his apartment in a housing complex and had to evacuate that apartment building of the citizens, we would have no way to do it, or say the officer was actually wounded. So this is it's not a tactical vehicle. I mean, you may hear people talk and say tactical vehicle. It's not. It's an armored rescue vehicle. Go to the garage and look at it. It's giant.
Okay.
I've heard talks over the years. We've had long talks about where's it going to fit. Well, it's giant, but it's the size of an oil truck. And I can tell you if the bullets are flying, we'll get probably close to 25, 30 people in the back of that thing.
Okay.
It's a cargo truck that's armored. It's not, for the SWAT team or anything like that. We don't have a SWAT team, but we have a lot of gun violence, and we have a need to rescue our citizens. 10 people were shot in Sacramento. What you don't see is I get updates every day on mass shootings. They don't even make the paper. The people in Texas Saturday want a hayride
and a guy pulled out a gun and shot like 6 people. There was a mass shooting today at a high school in Erie, Pennsylvania. We have to respond to those, and unfortunately, another reason it's been happening a lot is a lot of officers responding to domestic violence incidents have been shot or killed, and then it turns into a barricade situation where the officer's down in the front yard of the house because they're walking up and getting shot. So we need the ability to get at them. To buy a vehicle from open source, probably be $300,000. We got this from the government for free. It's going to just take us some money to get it on the road. As far as training goes, we have obviously a good number of Army veterans who have driven the vehicles, but then we'd also do a special driving program for the officers. And the vehicle will only be deployed in emergencies, not for shows or anything like that. We'd kind of like to keep it under wraps as much as possible. It will be painted to look like a police cruiser, not black or green. This will look black and white. So you know where the police right on it. And, there's always a lot of concern with militarization of police. But this is, I think we have an asset, we need to use it, and we're gonna come up short one of these days.
And the other cruisers that we have, are they equipped with the better glass in it, or?
No, they're not. We've actually gone with the city garage foreman, John Raymond, actually found an option for an armored driver's door that would stop rifle fire, but the other glass, it's the same glass we have in our cars. And, if you get a chance, you can go on YouTube and watch Officer DuPoint's body camera footage. You can see the rounds just going right through the whole car. It's pretty enlightening. There's no solution to that. Unfortunately, this vehicle would never be on patrol. This is the second wave coming. And our plan would be to have operators sprinkled throughout the shifts so we can get it up and running really quick and get to where we have to go to get the injured people out or get the evacuated people out.
Okay.
I'm not sneaking up on anybody with this thing.
Well, I hope we don't have to use it.
Unfortunately, if you look back from the Cedar Street days, which was 2013, I can probably rattle off 5 or 6 armed subjects when we could have used it, and probably 3 or 4 other weather events. Because it's an Army vehicle, it's got a high ground clearance, so it is able to forward off flooded streets and where other vehicles can't go, just by its design.
Okay. And in professional services and professional development, so in professional development, actually, basically, so the budget has kind of on the increasing side. So does that include any kind of cultural competency training or
It's
any
whatever
other
we can find.
more extensive trainings?
Fair and partial policing is coming out again with a latest iteration. It's whatever we can find for training right now. As they open up, as we get the announcements, we're sending people. So if the cultural competency or cultural sensitivity comes, that's something that's always been a high priority. We've talked 6 years about it, and that's something we always take very, very seriously. We're just waiting to get the instructors back out now and get them back into the classroom environment. Webinars and YouTube and Zoom are great, but sometimes you miss that in-person training. I think you can do an in-person training with a lot more impact in a lot shorter time than having somebody sit in front of a computer and just hit play as they're checking their phone. So I just
Totally agree. Thank you.
Alderman Wilson, please.
Going back to the armored response refurbishment, so for the request, you're not purchasing a new vehicle, you're
No, we're
just
not. No, the
fixing
vehicle's at the
this
city
one.
garage.
That's
It's
what-
the one in the
make
corner that
clear.
looks like it doesn't belong.
Yeah, just wanted to make that clear, so.
Yeah, it's not purchasing a new vehicle. We're taking the one now. We're gonna try to get the windows refurbished, painted, fix some of the bodywork up.
Yeah.
What's good about it, when the United States Army designed this vehicle, it's COTS, they call it commercial off the shelf. So under the armor, everything is a normal truck. It's Caterpillar engine, Allison transmission, tires are Michelin's, so it's all commercial products that are available. So we just need to get it going and get it rolling as cheaply as possible.
Got it. Now, my other question would be, currently, how many officers do you have, or uniformed officers do you have?
Well, last month I lost 3, so now I'm probably 11 right now. And one just graduated the police academy today, should be fair. He graduated merit, and he's going to be starting his FTO. He's a wonderful human being. Can't wait to introduce him to you guys. He's a good hire. And then Jordan Newt's in the academy. We've done agility tests. We've done a lot of stepped up the recruiting. For those of you who follow us on Facebook, you've seen the officer profiles. We're down to Norwich with Human Resource Director Mark's assistants. We've created our own internal Norwich Police test. There's Norwich Police test being given tomorrow. Seven people are taking it. We have the LEC test, which is the regional test, and then we've also signed on to the statewide CPCA test. So in the last 2 months, we've probably added 2 other streams to get candidates from. It's just the problem right now that agencies are having. If you saw the news yesterday, the New Haven police chief was on, and her hiring numbers are hiring numbers that the Norwich Police Department would have done probably 10 years ago. Like, oh, I've got 2 in the academy here, 1 in the academy there. And that's New Haven, so they're probably hundreds short. So, and then the length of the academy has to be a factor. It's 30 weeks, followed by 10 weeks of FTO. And so that, if we hired a guy today, it's about a 10-month process before the male and female officers any value to the city of Norwich. They're valued to us. It's just that so they can fill a job by themselves and not have to have that job replaced. Very, very long process. Connecticut turns out excellent police officers, and I'm proud of the men and women and the job they do, but it takes a long time to get to that off FTO and be on your own.
Yeah, I mean, and the only reason I'm asking that question, I see your request was for 92, of course, and, the proposed is for 85 total uniformed officers. So how close are you to the 85?
Not close right now. We're probably in the mid-70s right now.
Okay.
And it's a moving target. I mean, people, just Sunday, it was an officer resigned to pursue another career. So, getting to the 92 would be ideal. Obviously, I look to add this year, just because I thought it needs a conversation, to add 2 more officers in to the detective division to address the gun violence. To make a statement, like, hey, we have to do something where there's a ton of shootings in this town. And, the detectives need help. You look at over the last 15 years or so, our most successful years have been when we were fully staffed and we had boots on the ground. There's no magic to figure out how you get the crime rate down. It's boots on the ground. People seeing police officers, deterring crime, catching people in progress, and doing all that type of stuff.
And out of, the uniformed officers you have currently, going into this upcoming fiscal year, just off the top of your head, how many retirements do you possibly project or are eligible for possible retirement?
Eligible, there's probably another 5. What's got us this last year, since the protests and then COVID, it's the unexpected retirements or people just finding different career paths or becoming disenfranchised with policing in general. That's kind of what got us, the ambush resignations. Like, I don't expect this person to ever leave, and then they do, and it's tough We lost 3 retirements last month: Sergeant Kelsey, Sergeant St. Jean, and Officer Carter. All 3 of them long-term detectives. Officer Carter was our FBI task force officer. Sergeant St. Jean, long-term child sexual assault investigator, and she was wonderful. Sergeant Kelsey, long-term detective, also had a lot of background. That's like probably 75 to 80 years of experience. Tough to lose that. And I wish it was best, but it's still tough to lose.
All right, thank you.
Alderwoman Berto, please.
Hey, I just had a quick question. On page 74, where you have regional animal services, I noticed projected from 21 to 22 was 105,000. Now for 22, 23, it's up to 124,000.
We started late in the fiscal year, Josh.
Yeah, I believe it was about September 1 when they started during this fiscal year, so 105 is just a partial year.
Our fee to the regional, NECOG, Northeast Council of Governments is $124,000, all years of the contract, right?
I think the fee is based on our population, the populations of the other communities they serve, and then the per capita rate that they adopt. So it should hover around 124,000, shouldn't increase much above that.
Okay, thank you.
Alderwoman Gould.
Chief Daley, thank you for being here tonight. Your capital request, you're getting 5 new police cruisers. Asked for 6, but 5 will suffice for now.
It should, long answer to short questions, just because I like giving long answers. We took some of that money and transported it toward the armored rescue vehicle because that's more of an immediate need. And just like we're struggling to find officers, we're struggling to find cars. Ford came out yesterday and said they ceased production line of the Explorers, the SUV type cars for this year, and they've given us no reason date. The Chevy Tahoes you could order them for a 2-week period 4 months ago, and they're not coming in until 2023. Wow. So supply chain's hitting. Some of the features that we used to get, we're not able to get. The Norwich spec for a cruiser was a pretty healthy spec, and the officers had it well provided for. But it's tough. We have people shoot up our cars, or people ram us in the park. Those cars are still down, and we don't have vehicles to replace them. So we may be returning to Walking Beats real quickly, just because it's tougher and tougher to get vehicles. So why we were good with going to 5, 6 would be ideal, but we went to 5 because when the floodgates open, you guys don't want to hear me 5 years from now saying, hey, guess what, I need 17 police cars because I had to buy them all at one shot. So we've been really good trying to space them out. It's just getting tougher and tougher. They're forcing us into a mass purchase, which we don't like to do because then there's a mass replacement. And you're always going to have that bubble going down the road. Credit to Captain Vager. He does a really good job with following the mileaging, swapping cars around and moving them to different assignments. So we try to get the full 100,000 out of the cars. The cars have a 100,000 bumper-to-bumper warranty. I think our closest we come is like a 97,000 mile water pump blue. Water pump's like a $3,000 job, which takes like 16 hours to do. And that was warranty covered. So we tried to get them up to right around that 100,000 point and get them out of the fleet. But it's going to be a challenge for next year or 2.
Okay, you presently have 1 officer in the academy. You have 1 that just graduated to go to FTO. In the city manager's proposed use of the American Rescue Plan funds, you have 3 officers are proposed in that. How difficult do you think it will be to find those 3 officers?
It's going to be a challenge. We're up to it. We're going to try everything. We're trying all different kind of recruiting sources. But it's going to be a challenge just because we're already below it with our retirements. But we're going to keep plugging ahead. Our goal is always to get 3 or 4 into the academy. Our next academy comes in July. So in June. So we'll keep plugging away. And the tide seems to be turning. The public's perception toward police seems to slowly swing back a little bit. So as the public's perception swings back, then our applicant numbers go up. So we're already starting to see more applicants come. It's just not quite the applicants we're looking for yet.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Grant Neuendorf, please.
So with that being said, Chief Daley, I think something that we've all heard is that we want police forces that kind of represent the community. And I know we've talked about this beforehand about how you guys have a really nice police force that has a lot of different variations to it. So if you could just expand on that for the public.
Yeah, we try to represent the community we serve. We're not there, to be honest with you. We're lacking in African American representation. Asian American is 0. We have no Asian representation, and there's a significant Asian population in Norwich. we're doing really well with female officers lately. We've become a destination for female officers because we have so many. We're probably triple the rest of the county in the number of females, to the point we don't have locker space for them anymore. And that's a good thing, that's what we want. But we got to do a little bit better to get some of the communities of color involved in law enforcement. But right now, we just need applicants. We can't afford to be choosy. We're always seeking out minority candidates aggressively, and going to the schools and going into hitting NFA, trying to get them. And I've actually talked to all of Volusia about this. You graduate high school 17, 18. By law, you can't become a police officer until you're 21. We got to keep you on the right path for those 3 years, because a lot of people go out and stumble or they find another job. We got to get people focused into that, making that home. Getting community colleges involved. So we've done community outreaches with the NAACP, with Rose City United. Like I said, we're really stepping up the social media campaign, and we're even considering radio ads, trying to get across all types of stations, just to get the proper people through the door.
Thank you.
Pro Tem, please.
This has nothing to do with your budget, Chief, but just because I've been thinking about it and I've neglected to mention it to you in the last 3 times that we've spoken, to that point that you just made. I wonder if, and maybe you already do this, but to build a relationship with the military recruiters in town so that we have a line on Norwich area people who go into the military and choose military police as their MOS.
Yeah,
and then
we have a relationship with the military community, not as strong as it was years ago, because recruiters change and they get shipped, come and go. And to go to the sub-base, we reach out to the veterans groups. There's actually a pathway to becoming a police officer that's new within the last 3 or 4 years. I believe Groton's someone in the area who's done it, where you can come as a military policeman and then get like a lateral transfer, and you can become certified in Connecticut. It's just, that's not happening right now. A lot of the people who are in the military are either staying a little bit longer than they want, or they get out and just want to get out of the uniform business altogether. But it's worth looking at. We're trying to find everything. We had a great run with Gulf War or Global War and Terror veterans in the early 2000s. We probably have 10 or 11 that era veterans there, and they performed very, very well for us.
Chief, a couple months ago, you and I were speaking about the subject matter, and I asked you about, and this is a big problem for the state police. They have a lot of people coming up on retirement, but whether or not there was a way to create a channel for these people leaving state service who might still be...
I talked to a friend of mine. He just retired the other day as a master sergeant with 33 other troopers in one day. So they had 33 troopers retired in one day. Obviously, it's pension driven. Some of them, they don't want to go back to the shift work. Some places they do, or they go to a place where they really want to go to that's a little quieter. Stonington has picked up a couple of state troopers. We were out there. We're taking them laterals. We're taking them where it's comparable certifications. It's just there's nothing out there yet that people are coming for it. But when I did investigate it, they could come and be Norwich officers. It's just I don't think they're looking in that area. They're looking more for the part-time work, or the instead of jumping right back into a full-time job. If that answers your question.
I'm not surprised they're not looking, but I'm wondering if there's some way we create a program with incentives that captures their attention.
Incentives are something that, the police contract's coming up. I will speak briefly on that. Just, I think incentives and retention is something that needs to have a discussion. There's a lot of places out there. Florida just passed, Florida does things differently, a bill where I think the state will pay you a bonus if you're a certified police officer to move down to Florida and become a law enforcement officer. There's places out there that are giving, $3,500, $5,000 signing bonuses, retention bonuses for people who stay and don't leave, trying to incentivize people to do that. Limited success, I don't know if that's the answer. Money always helps, but, sometimes if your heart's not in it, your heart's not in it, and I don't think any amount of money can make that difference. But that's the trend across the country. You're going to see where you have signing bonuses for this. Like you say, hey, if you're an experienced officer, you come in here. Some of the other ideas we kicked around, and I think I spoke publicly to at least the Public Safety Committee, is an officer coming in, instead of having 23 years, if they came from another town, you're mandated to stay for 3 years in, say, town X, and then you can kind of become like a free agent. So after your 3 years, if they come to Norwich, maybe allow them to then only do 22 years and not move there. Instead of having to do 28 years in uniform, keep them at that 25, and they would be able to become a little bit more attractive. Years ago, when we had the 20-year retirement, we became a destination for New London. New London had a lot of problems going on. We took 7 officers from New London. That's pretty much the core of your detective division. And a lot of your supervisors today, those New London officers, who came here because they, the grass was greener, so they wanted to come to Norwich, and they came up here and they didn't lose time off their retirement date. So that's another option.
I think we need to explore all of them. I mean, our community police positions at this point, I don't believe they're filled.
They're vacant. No,
The last 2 went to the school resource officer positions, which are very much needed. Very grateful to see their presence there again. The COPS grant that we've never accessed that. Is that not?
COPS grant, I think we accessed it for a hot minute once, but that was about it.
Yeah.
The sad part is the night of the city had its large protest, we had the march on the police station. I come in and we got our notification of the COPS grant, which should have been 6 more officers going right to community policing and into the schools and doing all that. And the plan sits just gathering dust. It almost brings a tear to your eye because what could have been. And we're going to try to get it extended. It's usually a 3-year grant. This is year 3, and fingers crossed we can get it extended. But tremendous missed opportunity by no fault of anybody in this room or anybody in the city.
Do you think, in essence, by category, whether it's community policing and/or within the schools, might be a way as another incentive, picking up some of these retiring state troopers?
It could be. A lot of them do go become school safety officers or school security officers. They do that. And a couple of our officers who retired have expressed interest in doing that, going into the schools as a school safety officer. Some towns have armed security, some they're not armed. That's a conversation for probably everybody here with the superintendent and myself to figure out if that's a potential answer, whether they're quasi-officers or public safety officers or community service officers, whether they're sworn and armed in that type of situation. But it could be a workforce as a force multiplier in schools. Not force as we need force, but just size of the resources deployed.
Well, if they were specific to those types of positions and duties, that would then allow the others to stay the more visible, if you will, roles on the street, in the cars, detective, all that undercover work.
But as strange as it is, school resource officers position, I think we had 10 officers put in for them.
Oh, I know that.
They're sought after. Officers want to get in there and get into the schools, and so I do think it's still a nice, not a perk, but it's a reward for a younger officer who's out there doing their job and establish those long-term relationships. Remember, from the protest, it was the older DARE officers, Lieutenant Gomes, Lieutenant Paperny, Officer Reichert, even Bill Nash were still recognized by people in the crowd.
He was right there with you that day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was that's the relationship I'd like to do, so I'd like to get a long-term officer. So right now we have Officer Meikle and Officer McKinney, who also come on as the third. I kind of like to keep those younger officers in there, so as they go through their careers, the community will grow together. So it's when it's Sergeant Holman, Lieutenant, they'll grow through together, and they'll still always have those contacts that will start hallway at Kelly or teachers.
Thanks for the dialogue. A lot more to deal with, but Alderman Wilson.
So first I want to say I do commend you on that idea of the growth. It kind of touches to the point that Chief Montoya was making as far as being able to rank up and see it, but seeing the benefit in the field that they're in, and the importance of being an SRO and still being able to test and move up and ranked. I think that's an excellent approach for some of those officers who have earned it. The other question that I have is knowing that the stressors on finding candidates, one of the other concerns I know long-term has been the health benefits and whatnot overall for officers and whatnot. And do you think sometimes that is a deterrent for individuals coming or leaving early?
No, I think our health benefits or health insurance is industry standard. I mean, obviously, the more special you make Norwich, it makes it more of a destination for people. It's a couple of years ago there was a strategy session, and I commented then, and I still feel this way. If we're equal to, say, Stonington and Groton Long Point, it takes a special person to want to come and police a diverse community like Norwich, versus having to deal with overtime parking in some of these other towns.
Correct.
And the more you can incentivize the officers to come to the community. And then going back many years, Mayor, I'm trying to think who's on the council that we actually had things about, we had long-term discussions with Alderwoman Noblin about incentivizing
Housing
and
incentives.
incentivizing living in the city. Obviously, when you have a tragic incident like an officer in DuPont, you need officers right away, and the closer they live to Norwich is something here. Maybe it's something that we look like Utilities has. Utilities has they have a bonus for people who live in Norwich. Maybe it's something we do that, so people come here. Right now, probably about 25% of the officers live in town. There's a long, huge debate on whether or not living in town is better or not, but I think if you incentivize it, maybe it just gets more people and be part of the community. So when they're Little League coach, they're Little League coach with the kids that someday they'll be seeing, and hopefully a positive manner.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, concerns? Alderman Singh.
I just need a little more knowledge about this regional animal services, what they really do,
They took over
or to
our-
what extent they are helpful.
Probably going back to about 2 or 3 years ago, we lost an ICO to a on-the-job injury, and the other one, we had some problems. So we were working on what to do, what our next step was. So in talks with the city manager and Josh, we were approached by Northeast Council of Government to take over our animal control, which is our dog wardens, the old van, and all that stuff. So we decided it was in the best interest of the city to outsource the work because it gets tougher and tougher to find ACOs, and it gets kind of expensive. We gave a money-saving thing. We talked to the towns that had NECOG as a service, and they were pleased, and we investigated it, and the city manager and Josh kind of drew up a contract with them, and we went and we outsourced it to NECOG, and it was a very, I think it's been a very productive agreement so far. They took over our pound, and they took ownership of our vehicles, and now they do it, and the coverage is better. They have 2 ACOs on at all times, during the day. They have after-hours response with an ACO, and they have an evening ACO.
But everything goes through RPD.
If someone calls, they will. If they go online, they'll get the number directly to the pound. But if they call us, we'll farm them out. Obviously, if there's a dog bite or something like immediate, or a dog's running around on West Main Street in danger of getting struck, we're going. It's the nuisance barking dogs and the captured roaming dog is where DCOG comes in.
And raccoons?
They'll probably come out and help. They do some trapping. DEP also has a help, but I think there's like one officer on the entire eastern half of the state. So
I know.
That's a concern, but DEP is a resource for that.
Okay, thank you.
Alderwoman Berto.
I just have a quick question. For the regional animal services, does that also cover veterinary services for police canine?
No, that comes out of our budget.
That comes out of your budget?
Yeah.
How many canines do you guys have on staff?
2 patrol and 1 narcotic dog.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Thank you, Chief.
That concludes public safety for tonight then.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you.
Thank you all.